I'm calling Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr Chair. This bill, in terms of Part 2, has got a Clause 8, and that changes all references to mineral reserves in the Crown Minerals Act to mineral resources. Now, Mr Chair, that's very symbolic because this government sees nature as a resource ripe for exploitation rather than having values which deserve protection and keeping in reserve for present and future generations. What right do we have to try and access oil and coal and minerals that were put down millennia ago? It's almost as if this government doesn't believe humans are going to exist in another 200 years because it wants to exploit everything now, rather than recognising that in 200 years' time we might have the technology where we can mine coal without and burn it without the emissions that contribute to climate change. But no, this government wants it now. It never thinks of the future, and it doesn't think of the environmental debt that it's creating for our future generations. And Mr Chair, there was Mr Bridges on Easter Monday, I think it was, introduced the SOP which amended the Principal Act by putting in the Anadarko Amendment, the no protest amendment, and in the April issue of Law Talk. And I'd just like to quote from that. It described what the government has done. It said, and I quote, "The government appears to be developing a practice of using post-select committee supplementary order papers as a portal through which to rush controversial law changes." And we are seeing the same thing happening tonight, not through an SOP, but through using urgency. And as Law Talk said, and I quote again, "The introduction of significant law changes by SOP bypasses the normal vetting processes and increases the risk of sloppy lawmaking." Well, we've certainly seen that with the previous bill because it's back here before it's even become law. So this government should be ashamed of what it's doing tonight, and it should be ashamed because of the way in which democracy is being undermined. Not just by that noxious little Clause 14, which creates that 500-metre zone around vessels so that you can't protest. Not just because the government wants to shut down dissent, but also because of the way this bill is going through under urgency with no opportunity for public comment. And that's typical, because we've seen a whole weakening of the regulatory regime in New Zealand under this government. We've seen in the Exclusive Economic Zone Act, which we've passed, which is yet to come into force, which had a bastardised version of sustainable management. And then we've seen regulations under that Act which make it a permitted activity with no opportunity for the public to comment on offshore deep-sea prospecting. So what are New Zealanders expecting? What are New Zealanders able to do if they cannot make submissions on legislation, if they cannot make submissions on applications to prospect offshore? Of course they take to protest because there is no legitimate forum to express their concerns and their dissent. So what does the government do? It then seeks to shut down that dissent. So that's why this bill is very troubling, Mr Chair, because it potentially increases the level of disaffection with government and with democracy in New Zealand, because people are being denied their legitimate right to have a say. They cannot do it in this House through submissions and contributing to the lawmaking. They now cannot do it under this bill by protesting, because the government wants to make that a criminal offence. So, Mr Speaker, where do people go when they see that they cannot have a say? They get disaffected. This is how revolutions start, Mr Speaker, because people cannot have a say through the normal processes. So this is what this government is doing. It's shutting down the right to have a say. It's totally undemocratic, and Clause 14 at the heart of this bill is about that. Because, Mr Chair, the government wants to make it easy for the big corporates, the transnational oil companies, the Chinese state company. It wants to make it easier to exploit nature and make it easier for its mates, which doubtless contribute to the National Party coffers at election time. So that's what this bill is about, Mr Speaker, Mr Chair, making it easier to exploit nature and actually attacking the heart of the democracy by writing roughshod over due process and then suppressing the right to protest.
I'm calling Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It's my pleasure to take a call